I think the energy sector in general for Houston and for Texas is going to be amazing going forward, because the amount of money that has to pour into the transition is just going to create a huge number of jobs and academic positions and technology positions. And so that's I think clearly the way forward. When you talk to the folks at the ION, they sort of focus on material science as being a big part of it. Because material science and manufacturing, sometimes we lose sight of the fact that some of the best high-tech manufacturing in the country is done here in Texas. This is where they do the autonomous test driving of long-haul tractor trailers. It's where it's a lot can be done here that cannot easily be done elsewhere, because the infrastructure is so strong, and that infrastructure is a huge advantage. And you go to the Northeast, it's just crumbling everywhere you go. There isn't any infrastructure to speak of. And when you come down to places like Texas, if you get used to the Northeast, your eyes are wide open. You can't believe it. It's like, wow, these roads, they're not full of potholes. So I think that, and the port logistics, and everything that we have here in terms of logistics is way ahead of most of the ports in the world.
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, let's try that one more time. Good afternoon. Okay, that's a whole lot better. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. My name is Bob Charlet. I am the president of the Houston Business Journal. It is great to be in Big D. Agreed?
Agreed.
Absolutely.
And thank you for being here. We are here to talk about the growing trend of technology companies choosing Texas. And for our format today, we are going to hear from these two amazing panelists, but we're going to save time at the end for your questions, so please be thinking about that. We're going to spend roughly around 30 minutes. We'll see how it goes, but please be thinking about your questions. On my far left is Jay Cross, president of Howard Hughes Corporation, and to my immediate left is Margaret Kidd, University of Houston professor. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit more about them. Jay, would you be first?
It's good to be here with everybody. I started off in the real estate development business in the 80s, and then in the early 90s we had the S&L crisis, since that was the end of the real estate business, and I morphed into sports and ended up building a couple arenas, stadium, MetLife Stadium, which was built just before this one was, but always with a view of wanting to get back to real estate. Transitioned to the related companies about 12 years ago, and was really put in charge of the Hudson Yards project in Manhattan. And I've done that for quite some time. We opened in spring of 19, at which point I had enough of Manhattan, so I think that's a good segue into today's discussion, and moved to Houston about a year and a half ago to join Howard Hughes.
Thank you very much. Okay, Margaret.
Well, thank you. I have a similar history. My career started, I am from Houston, but my career started out on Wall Street. I did 2 tours of duty, as I call it, but all roads led back to Texas, where my family's been for 5+ generations. I joined University of Houston 6 years ago as an instructional assistant professor, and 4 years ago I was put in charge. I inherited the Supply Chain and Logistics Technology Bachelor Science program, which is a STEM Supply Chain and Logistics program. And just recently got promoted to associate professor. And this is my first time to be in Cowboy Stadium. So thank you for allowing me in.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. We're going to jump into the first question. We've seen the stats about all of the one-way U-Hauls to Texas over the past few years. Why do you think people are choosing Texas? Why are they coming here?
I think it's, well, certainly been accelerated by COVID, but I think we saw this trend even before that. You've got to keep in mind that the millennial generation is bigger than the boomer generation. And those millennials are now in their early 30s, and they're starting to confront big life questions. They have families. Where do they want to raise their kids? Where do they want to live? Where do they want to work? And historically, the answer to that question, if you were a millennial growing up in the Midwest, you were basically told, you want to get your career, go to a gateway city. So you had to go to LA, San Francisco, Chicago, or New York. And that was accelerated all pre-COVID. Everybody had to go to the big city. And when they got to the big city, they realized it's got a lot of challenges. Cost of real estate, quality of schools, crime. All of a sudden, COVID comes along, and everybody disperses. And to a large degree, a lot of these millennials go back to where they grew up, and they now find, that was pretty good. And I don't necessarily have to go back to New York or Chicago or San Francisco. And I now starting to think about the quality of the schools here in the Woodlands, or my parents are here, do I want to stay close to them? And I think that really, people gravitated, they had to make some fundamental decisions about how they wanted to live their lives. So then what they look at is like, I want to go to a place where I've got good schools, I've got safe backyard, I've got a great little town center, I've got an economic infrastructure. And I think that's really, people then realized, be it Texas or Houston in particular, or Arizona or Nevada, or either the Carolinas, these are friction-free states. And so they wanted to come because they want to get a better life as they move forward. And so we've been a big beneficiary of that. We build total communities. So we don't build 1,000-acre subdivisions, we build tens of thousands of acres. And the reason why we do that is we want people to come there for 50 years. In the Woodlands, it is 50 years old now. Next year it'll be 50 years old. And that means we've got schools, we've got community colleges, we've got places of worship, we've got offices, we've got retail. We've got a full service economy on the edge of a much bigger economy. And I think that's the key, is people still want to be in metropolitan centers. They don't necessarily want to go, out into the middle of the country unless they're going to literally work from home. But for most people, they still want to be in a social environment, and that means going to metropolitan centers. And I think Texas is just got this. I mean, I've experienced it. We came down here from New York, and a friend of a friend who's in the real estate business said, "Oh, have you met everybody through? Have you met the Houston real estate gang?" I said, "Not really." "Oh, I'm going to throw a lunch for you." He's like, throws a lunch, and I walk in, and all the biggest developers in Houston are in there, and they didn't know me from Adam. Now, I can assure you that would never have happened in New York City. Like, as soon as you arrive, it's like, get out of here. And so I think that welcome nature also helps propel it, and then the word of mouth travels, and it builds upon itself.
Can I follow up on that? You guys build the big master plan communities and incredibly successful. The Woodlands has been voted, top or best city to live in the United States, which is amazing. Yep. Cost of living is a huge factor, especially for millennials. How does that factor into your world in terms of planning, and is that a key factor? You talked about millennials. Where does cost of living factor into all those choices?
So cost of living, I think, is incredibly important. And what I think, when you look at the history of the Woodlands, when George Mitchell conceived of it, it was a place for everybody. Now, he was driven by a love of conservation and broad swaths of greenways along the boulevards. But even then, the idea was you get your starter home there, and then you would grow from there. And now today, we do multifamily, we do condos. We've basically sold out of single family houses for sale, and it's all resale market now. But I think the idea is that you've got to have something for every single price point. And more recently, we actually went north of the Woodlands to Conroe and Woodlands Hills, where we bought another 5,000 acres just so we could provide more low-cost entry housing. It's all single family, but it's so that people who are working in the Woodlands and maybe can't afford it can just go up the road and still get that starter home. It's critically important that you have all factors considered. As Jim Rouse said famously in Columbia, Maryland, he wants the CEO and the caretaker to live in the same community, go to the same church. It's very, very important in terms of how these centers work.
Margaret, can you jump in on this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. The secret's out. There's this quality of life that exists not only in Texas in general, but Houston in particular. And really, from my lens in higher education, Texas provides excellent pathways, whether you're doing a 4-year degree at, say, my university, which is a Tier 1 Carnegie Public Research University, or you're going a community college track. The options are endless. They're accessible and they're affordable. And you cannot say the same thing relative to, say, East Coast schools or schools in other parts of the country. So just that educational or technical training element is there. And I mean, this training is what is providing, you know, skills for the workforce for this next generation of technology companies that are moving into our space. I think another thing really, you know, again, really from this concept of connectivity, you know, Houston, you can fly just about anywhere. In fact, 36 countries, 193 destinations. So whether you're a corporation or you're a family and you want to travel for vacation or you're traveling for business, I mean, we just have endless nonstops. I mean, the only other market that I think is comparable is New York City as far as connectivity, or maybe Atlanta. And I think, you know, looking at all the global businesses that are based in Houston, you know, that's an important decision maker. I think one thing that a lot of folks aren't really familiar with is 1 in 4 Houstonians is born somewhere else, outside of the country. So there's a very unique cultural tradition in Houston. It's very diverse. And I think folks, you know, relocating for other parts of the U.S. Find it very welcoming. Jay hit it on the nail. You can come from anywhere and be invited and be accepted into the greater Houston community. There's not social barriers or established barriers to entry like you would have in New York City. And I can say from experience living in Manhattan 2 times, I mean, no one asked me to come to a party to introduce me to a bunch of leaders, but that kind of thing happens regularly in Houston. So it's very welcoming.
Okay, guys, reminder for our audience, think about your questions for the panel as we wrap up. Next question, what is the role of technology in the future of business? Margaret, how about you start that one?
Well, a lot of people think technology is just in Austin. So let me change the narrative. I like to write down exact data points. There's 243,000 jobs in the Houston region connected to technology, and it's a broad range of technology. It's technology for the energy sector, it's technology for healthcare, it's technology for logistics. Remember, we are a major global logistics hub, so it's broad-based. Also, there's 8,800 tech-related companies in the region, and I would basically say, I mean, there's a couple of things going on. It's the amalgamation of companies that are together, and that's an urban planning concept of amalgamation effect. It's the infrastructure, it's the workforce, and it's the amenities that are supporting this ecosystem. And I think it's a compelling story. I've seen so many new companies. I was so excited when Hewlett-Packard moved their headquarters. They were already in Houston, but permanently got the whole gang here. But there's a company we work with from Brazil, and they established an office in Houston a few years ago, Radix Engineering and Software. Well, myself and a couple of colleagues worked with this company to create a digital master plan for the Port of Açu, which is the largest private port in Brazil. So I go back to connectivity, I go back to collaboration, I go back to welcoming environment, and so great things can happen.
Can I stay with you a little bit more there? The knock often you hear from the outside about Houston is on the education side, that we don't have enough tech, ready. What do you say to those folks? Is that accurate, or is that just, a myth that needs to be, dispelled?
I think that's a myth that might have gotten started at a competing region of the state.
Not Austin, no way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to point fingers. I'm very proud of the ecosystem. I mean, I'm just going to take one illustration. I mean, Houston Community College started a associate's degree in artificial intelligence. I mean, there are many examples of schools really stepping up. Even in my own program, we've embedded geographic information systems, so when students graduate from my program, they know how to define where's an optimal location for a distribution center, or what's the optimal route, right? And we can apply that to environmental science too. So, I mean, I think, yes, certainly we need to get more students into STEM-related fields, But part of that happens at the elementary schools and the intermediate schools. We interact with the high schools. We need to go down to intermediate and elementary and let these kids know, here are the jobs, but here are the skill sets you need. And, come to our summer camp, or, come mentor us for a day. Come trail us at the office.
Jay, what are your thoughts on this, future of technology?
Well, I think, everybody is in the technology business one way or another today. And so we're finding we've had tenants come from California. We had tenants come from New York State, pure technologists. And I think, once again, even technologists are people too. And so they want to think about where they're going to raise their family. It's one of the reasons why they feel they have to get out of Silicon Valley. It's way too expensive, for your average engineer. And so going to Austin's great, but it's not the only place where technology jobs exist. In fact, you mentioned Hewlett-Packard. So one of our consultants said, Hewlett-Packard's going to do better in Houston than Oracle's going to do in Austin, because there's 30 applicants for every technology job in Houston, and there's only 7 or 8 applicants for every technology job in Austin. And so Oracle's going to be competing against Tesla, whereas Hewlett-Packard's competing against Exxon. And so where you go, I think, depends to some degree on the nature of the technology that you're pursuing. But when you think about between NASA, the energy sector, and the healthcare sector in Houston, those 3 alone produce an enormous number of technology workers, but also a lot of technology opportunities. So I think it's going to permeate everything we do, and Houston's in a nice position to take advantage of that.
It's a little off subject, but the ION and others have really emerged in the last, say, 3, 4, 5 years, sort of established more of a geographic area for innovation in tech. Do you think we're doing enough in Houston to get the word out on what that is and how companies can benefit from that, or do you think we have a ways to go?
We can always do a better job getting the word out. That's a constant challenge, and it's a very competitive world, and you're competing against a lot of cities and a lot of states. I think the ION is a great example of what can be done in Houston. Coming back to your education question, Rice is often cited as a big feeder school to Silicon Valley. Greentown Labs, which is there, part of the ION, which is startups and energy transition. I think the energy sector in general for Houston and for Texas is going to be amazing going forward, because the amount of money that has to pour into the transition is just going to create a huge number of jobs and academic positions and technology positions. And so that's I think, clearly the way forward. When you talk to the folks at the ION, they sort of focus on material science as being a big part of it. Because material science and manufacturing, sometimes we lose sight of the fact that some of the best high-tech manufacturing in the country is done here in Texas. This is where they do the autonomous test driving of long-haul tractor trailers. It's where it's a lot can be done here that cannot easily be done elsewhere, because the infrastructure is so strong, and that infrastructure is a huge advantage. And you go to the Northeast, it's just crumbling everywhere you go. There isn't any infrastructure to speak of. And when you come down to places like Texas, if you get used to the Northeast, your eyes are wide open. You can't believe it. It's like, wow, these roads, they're not full of potholes. So I think that, and the port logistics and everything that we have here in terms of logistics is way ahead of most of the ports in the world.
Let me jump in here, because I think this is an interesting point to contribute. COVID provided lessons learned about where your manufacturing facilities are located, where your sourcing is located, and what ports of entry you're using. And the reality check is 40% of our imports from Asia come to LA Long Beach, which was a bottleneck prior to even COVID. But so you're seeing folks retune their supply chains and really look at this risk-adjusted model, which means more nearshoring and onshoring. And Texas has the most unique position in the country. Within 1,000 miles, you can reach 152 million consumers. And we have the infrastructure to support that. And I think another point about Texas and why these tech firms continue to to reinvest. I mean, the CHIPS Act certainly helped, because national security and economic security are also relevant to this conversation. To have manufacturing of critical items, such as chips, to occur on our shores. So I think, all roads are kind of pointing our direction at the moment, and I think we have a trend that's going to last a while. I think there's some sustainability there.
Thank you.
Just going back to the
Yep.
port
Yep.
question. So everybody thinks the Port of LA is congested because they can't get the containers off the docks. And so the ships are waiting outside because they can't get to the dock. The bigger issue is they can't get the containers off the docks because they can't get warehouses approved, and they can't build
Yeah.
new warehouses in a highly regulatory environment. So there's nowhere for the containers to go, or they can't get truck drivers
Yeah.
to get them off. And we don't have any of those issues.
No.
This business-friendly environment and infrastructure means that those bottlenecks just don't exist here.
Well,
And Mark, we're going to, just for time, let's stay with the port. Houston plays a big role because of the port for Texas. How does connectivity contribute?
well, the UN has a report that came out a few years ago, and they looked at 50 ports, and they ranked them based on connectivity. Connectivity in the terms of direct trade, port to port. Houston ranked number 13, and I believe the number was 156 connections. So the only ports ahead of Houston were Asian ports, and then a couple of European ports, Rotterdam and Hamburg. But that connectivity, that trade is economic development. Trade is also a multiplier effect for the local economy. And so it's been a blessing for the state and for the region. In Houston, the Houston Ship Channel contributes almost 20% of Texas's GDP, which is enormous, and contributes a little over 1.3 million jobs. So when these manufacturing folks are coming into our state or into Houston, we're a natural location to locate. And also, Texas is the #1 exporter for over 20 years. I want to say the number's like 370 billion. I mean, 20 years leading in exports. So if you're going to do manufacturing, why wouldn't you want to be in Texas?
Jay, what do you want to add to that, talking about the port and connectivity?
Well, I think that as Margaret was saying, it's a combination of in and out. So that if you're importing raw materials to manufacture, that's one thing. If you're manufacturing here and you're a big exporter, that's another thing. I think that when you've got more commerce flowing, you've got more reasons for economic growth. Economic growth lifts all boats. And I think that there's not that many. And today's world, you can't create a port very easily. So you either have one or you don't. And to be able to take advantage of one that's got lots of capacity is a huge advantage.
Yeah, greenfield development for ports doesn't exist in the U.S. We see it in Africa and South America for extractive industries. So, in the U.S., I mean, Houston is one of the leading it is the leading port for tonnage. So we're critical to also the national economy. And I should remind everyone, and in case you're not aware, both the Port of Houston and Port of Freeport have major infrastructure projects on the books. Both involve deepening and widening the channels. Houston has Project 11 that launched earlier this year, which is a $1 billion initiative. Freeport has a similar initiative with their port to accommodate more trade and more manufacturing that's coming through our city.
Port is also the largest petrochemical complex in the world, where all plastics are made. Houston is the biggest. Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, we're going to have one more question before we're going to get to our audience questions, and hopefully you have a lot of them. Let's talk about future. As we look to the future, what do you see? And this is with the mind of tech and companies coming to Texas. What's the future?
I think what the future is going to hold is the downtown is no longer going to be the center of everything, and I think the peripheral, the edges of the downtown are going to be the future, and it's for a few reasons. So one of the things about the Woodlands is we just got certified LEED as a LEED community, the first community in North America to be certified by LEED. And I thought, wow, that's great. I wonder how we did it. And they said, because you scored really well in transportation. That doesn't make sense. We don't have public transportation in the Woodlands. What they meant was there's more people commuting into the Woodlands every day than commuting out of the Woodlands. And more importantly, most people are commuting from within the Woodlands to the Woodlands. So they have a 15-minute commute. And I think people have come to realize they don't want to spend an hour going either way, from Sugar Land to downtown or Katy to downtown. And so these edge cities are going to be the future because we're going to be building newer offices but smaller offices. So office employers are going to have more flex space, shorter leases, the ability to flex up and down in terms of capacity, people coming and going, a more flexible work environment, but they want that to be close to the housing stock, close to the schools, close to the houses of worship, close to the sports. All of that has to be, the food and beverage and the dining, all has to be proximate to your little location. We just opened Kirby Ice House a week ago in the Woodlands, the longest bar in Texas, I'm told. But that's all part and parcel of creating a culture within the community. And so those communities are going to locate around metroplexes. They have to be around a metroplex because they need that economic activity that a port or a big industry generates. So they're not going to be in the middle of suburban Texas. They're going to be around Austin, around San Antonio, around Dallas, and around Houston. And I think that's going to be the future. People are going to want to migrate to what is like a small town, but they want the small town on the edge of the big city.
Margaret, tell us about the future.
Well, I agree with Jay. What we're seeing in Houston, and if you look at the demographic shifts and projected out to 2040, you're seeing this shift to the edge cities, whether it's Sugar Land or it's the Woodlands or it's Katy or this area where Bridgeland is kind of in the middle. It's this kind of southwest quadrant, and it's jobs and people. And so, we have to plan in advance for that infrastructure. From the educational side, we've been very blessed as a university. Hewlett-Packard has partnered with us with the Data Science Center a couple of years ago, and that's addressing energy and healthcare and a few other sectors. Shell just set up their Energy Transition Institute, which will be looking at more at renewables and alternative fuels. And even my program is in the middle of some discussions with the Mideast to upskill capacity to align more with automation and digitization in the supply chain for the workforce.
Any final thoughts?
I think we hit it.
How about some applause for our great panel? Okay, now it's your turn to ask some questions. The first one, yes, ma'am.
So we represent the Austin Asian Chamber of Commerce, where we work to connect global markets to Austin and vice versa. And so I actually heard you discussing how 40% of the imports that come through the LA port are bottlenecked, and how you are avoiding that is by doing nearshoring or onshoring manufacturing. But my question is, does Texas have the infrastructure, and what are the ports doing to support those Asia imports to help relieve those bottlenecks and also capture that business?
Well, Houston, the greater Houston region has an excess of 16 million square feet of industrial real estate under construction, average price around 65 cents a foot. Vacancy rate maybe around 6.5%, more or less. If you go to the LA market, the vacancy rate is under 1%. Okay, under construction, under 4 million square feet, and price is $1.80. It's a no-brainer. You're going to come to Texas Gulf Coast or Southeast Atlantic Coast, and we're seeing record amounts of trade move over the last 10 years, and then as a result of COVID and now the labor situation in the West Coast, you're seeing more. Texas has always had, and this is a little off subject, but it's still related to your question, Texas has always had very positive labor relations. Labor is a partner at the table. I think that's part of that Texas miracle. It's equality of all stakeholders and a lot of communication. But there is preparation. And we have the infrastructure, 3 Class 1 rail lines. We have the interstate system. There's room for that cargo to move to the hinterland.
If I could do a quick follow-up question to that, you said that basically that it's a no-brainer and that you're seeing record amounts. Do you have a percentage of that's coming from, that you were capturing that business from LA?
I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but I can tell you a data point that I read just this last week, and it was I mean, trade's up about 17, 20% in our port ecosystem. And we're seeing a decrease in trade in the LA, Long Beach area. If you send me an email, I'll be happy to link you to an article that'll give you a chart, and you could see it visually.
Thank you.
Great question.
That is a good question.
Who's got another question? Yes.
This may go more to you, Jay, I don't know. But with the development in the Woodlands, you know, these new corporate headquarters and office buildings, I'm not familiar with the Houston area that much, but discussions around the Dallas area, Collin County and so forth, there's a lot of discussion about need for more multifamily housing, but also workforce housing. Not affordable housing, but workforce housing. So can you all talk about the efforts
Sure.
going on in the Houston area about that?
So most of what we're building today is multifamily. And what we're finding is that when you aim multifamily down to as an affordable level as you can, you're basically building workforce housing. So when we call them big house, so it'll be 4 units on the ground floor, 4 units on the upper floor. They're surface parked. That's basically workforce housing. And it's priced so economically, it's what you would call workforce housing. Then when we go into a mid-rise or a high-rise, we start to get more expensive, and then finally we'll go to a condo product. But we're doing all of it because we think that particularly multifamily, there's almost insatiable demand. And what happens is people keep trading up. And so, you know, some of the older stuff gets old and tired, and you build new stuff. But for us, it's kind of the backbone of what our development pipeline shows. Not so much office.
Another question. Trying to see. Yes.
I know this panel was a little bit about technology. I'm curious, what is a technology that you're seeing become more mainstream that you're excited about related to your fields?
Well, we had a tenant, NIDIC, move from New York down to the Woodlands, and they're a Bitcoin currency company, which basically aims to be called like a trust company or a bank in Bitcoin. And I think we're seeing blockchain technology, notwithstanding the vagaries of the market lately. We think that is going to become certainly we're looking on it. We're thinking of doing leases in blockchain. We started with this one company, but we see internal to our own business moving in that general direction. As that starts to happen, I think that's going to be a huge growth industry within the technological space. We also, because we're a real estate company, we look at property tech, whether it's smart locks on your house or apps for the office worker. I think that is maybe not such a big growth industry because it's very segmented, it's kind of specialized. Construction tech's another one though. I think you're going to see a lot of technology on the job site increasingly so that makes the job site safer, more efficient, easier to track, therefore cheaper to build. That's got, I think, a long way to go.
I think for my sector and the logistics and supply chain, I mean, it's this whole concept of automation. I mean, it's no surprise. Every autonomous truck trial is happening here in Texas. And our legislature had a lot of foresight to kind of put in regulations so that could happen. It's not happening in California, it's prohibited. So I think that's just one more leadership straw for the state. Certainly with a shortage of 80,000 plus truck drivers, automation frees up that market to bring in a broader scope of workers to work in an office, you know, behind the screen to support that autonomous truck. I think also robotics. Amazon has a huge footprint in Houston, in the Houston region, with their number of distribution centers. Their most advanced distribution center is in Sugar Land. It's incredible, the technology they've deployed. I mean, that's the standard, that's the gold standard. So there's just so much happening, and it's happening in a very rapid pace. And we have to make sure that our workforce can keep up with these changes.
We'll come back to you again.
I
Yes.
was wondering if you all see much with the 3D printers in the Houston market.
3D printers.
3D printing of homes, Austin.
Oh, of homes? I'm a little skeptical of that. I think that I did my thesis on manufactured senior citizen housing, and that was more than
Why did
5
he look
years
at me
ago.
when he said that?
So it's, I just think that anything that's kind of factory applied in the building industry is difficult, and everybody that tries seems to fail. I think it's for two reasons. Every site has a different topography, has different site constraints. You don't know whether your curb cut's going to be in the same location to your front door, et cetera. That's one issue. So everything always has to be slightly customized. It's not like a car where every car can drive on every road. Not every manufactured house can sit on every lot. And then I think the other thing that it disregards is the construction industry is incredibly efficient. When you consider it's custom, everything is more or less custom built. It always amazes me how quickly things get built. And that's just highly productive labor force with the tools they need to get it done. And so the factory has a hard time competing because the factory has the logistics of transportation added on top. And so it's just not as straightforward. You would think it would take off, but I don't see it. And the 3D printed houses, you've got to really believe the finish is what comes out of the machine. So it's like living in Adobe. I think it's got a ways to go.
One more question here.
Sorry to hijack with my third question, but I wanted to know, I hear the talk about the real estate and the relocation, and I wanted to know, have you considered partnering with global companies for real estate opportunities? For example, we have Samsung in Austin, and we also have Tesla, which is also another global company, even though it's based in the U.S. Have you considered partnering with them for real estate opportunities to get those housing issues out of the way?
So I'm not sure I understand what you mean by partner.
For their corporate housing, is that what you mean?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So part of our pitch is, if you're going to come and build a factory or an office complex or headquarters, and you want us to build housing to go with it, we're absolutely. So we'll do build-to-suit housing along with build-to-suit office or manufacturing space, and we think that again comes with when you have enough mass to control enough acreage, you can offer both at the same time. Whereas if you've only got an industrial park and you're pitching them for a manufacturing facility, you can't very well take care of their housing needs. It's the advantage we have as a master plan community developer. We can do a little bit of everything or all of everything or none of everything, whatever you want. So it's really a la carte.
Any more questions? How about one final round of applause for our panel? And thank you guys for being with us. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job, guys.